Tonight, the warning for President Biden that the world is witnessing the beginning of a Russian invasion in Ukraine. New images of violence in breakaway regions of Ukraine after Vladimir Putin recognized them as independent and ordered Russian troops to go in. President Biden at the White House today condemning Putin.
Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries?
The president announcing tough new sanctions against Russia. Our team coverage inside Ukraine, Russia, and beyond. Also tonight, the 3 white men convicted of murdering Ahmaud Arbery are found guilty on all counts in a federal hate crimes trial. After the verdict, Arbery's mother talking to us how she reacted. Back-to-back storms on the move, danger on the roads, nearly 100 cars and a massive pileup finally cleared in Oregon. Al Roker is tracking it all. 2 Black Hawk choppers crashing during a training exercise in Utah. Incredibly, no crew members injured.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. President Biden is calling provocative Russian moves in eastern Ukraine the beginning of an invasion. Here's where we are as we come on the air tonight. American combat aircraft in Europe are being redeployed into eastern Europe. It's a movement to reassure NATO allies close to Ukraine. President Biden today also announcing new and severe financial sanctions against Russia. All of it in response to Vladimir Putin's brazen claim of independence for 2 breakaway regions inside Ukraine, including areas firmly under Ukrainian control. Tonight, diplomatic options are taking a hit. The U.S. calling off talks between Secretary of State Blinken and his Russian counterpart. As Americans are reminded again, all this could cost us here at home, especially at the pump. Our team is in place here and overseas. We want to begin with Peter Alexander at the White House.
Tonight, President Biden's move.
There's no question that Russia is the aggressor.
Announcing the promised punishment after Vladimir Putin recognized the independence of 2 pro-Russian areas in eastern Ukraine and deployed Russian forces there.
I'm announcing the first tranche of sanctions to impose costs on Russia and will continue to escalate sanctions if Russia escalates.
The U.S. slapping those penalties on 2 large Russian banks and on Russian debt, which the president says means Moscow can no longer raise money from the U.S. and Europe, and also sanctioning several Russian elites. The president today not mincing words.
This is the beginning of a Russian invasion of Ukraine.
That after backlash over the White House's reluctance to call it an invasion last night.
Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law.
But critics say the president's moves don't go far enough. Republican Lindsey Graham tweeting President Biden is not seizing the moment. The sanctions outlined are woefully inadequate to deter Putin's efforts to redraw the European map and dismember a neighboring democracy. Former President Trump also blasting President Biden while praising Putin's justification for his move.
I went in yesterday and there was a television screen and I said, this is genius. Putin declares a big portion of the Ukraine. Putin declares it as independent. Oh, that's wonderful. This never would have happened with us. Had I been in office, not even thinkable.
Meanwhile, the president is touting Germany's announcement that it will suspend approval of Nord Stream 2, the controversial gas pipeline between Russia and Germany. While in the U.S., gas prices that were already at an 8-year high are now spiking. California yesterday hitting an all-time record, nearly $5 a gallon.
I want to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump.
And Peter, where does this leave the likelihood of a summit between President Biden and President Putin?
Yeah, Lester, the White House says that a summit between those 2 leaders is not in their plans at this point and that Russia would need to de-escalate the crisis for that meeting to happen. Also tonight, as you noted, the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, just called off his meeting with Russia's foreign minister scheduled for Thursday. Lester.
Peter Alexander at the White House. Thanks. And in Ukraine, growing fears this evening over whether President Putin intends to deploy forces inside Ukraine beyond the pro-Russian territory he already controls. Richard Engel is in one of those areas in eastern Ukraine that's on edge tonight.
This is what it's like to live in a Ukrainian village next to separatist areas backed by Russia. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry says separatist fire killed at least one man here. The separatists have dramatically increased their attacks over the last several days, goading the Ukrainian military to fire back, now that they're protected by Russian President Vladimir Putin and the 150,000-plus troops he has near the border. Overnight, armored vehicles without markings were seen on the move in the pro-Russian enclaves after Putin recognized their independence. People there speak Russian, and Russia already has thousands of troops there. NATO says more Russian forces have arrived. But Putin is now signaling he's interested in more than just territory Russia already controlled. On Russian television today, Putin said he recognized the independence of areas firmly held by the Ukrainian government, including a major, somewhat rusting industrial city of 450,000, Mariupol on the Sea of Azov. Tonight, protesters in the city gathered to support their government and denounce Putin.
Do you think that he's going to stop?
I'm afraid that he wants to keep going.
And if he does keep going, what does that mean for you, for the people here?
It means that it doesn't mean that it's a time of peace. It means that it's a time of sadness. It's a time of war, of death.
Living in the crosshairs in a nation Putin says doesn't and shouldn't exist.
And tonight, Ukraine's President Zelensky, who has said he will not give in to Russia, announced he's calling up national reserves. Lester?
Richard, thanks. And so all this leaves the mystery, trying to figure out what Putin's next potential move might be. He may have already given away key clues through what he said and done in the past. Keir Simmons is in Moscow.
Tonight, the world again left wondering what Vladimir Putin has planned. We know what he thinks. Today on television, again saying Ukraine could end the crisis by renouncing its ambitions to join NATO. And his hour-long unscripted appearance last night, a more extreme echo of speeches he has made for 15 years. Railing against NATO in a famous 2007 speech, stunning Western leaders. Just this past July, writing Russians and Ukrainians were one people, a single, whole.
He's been in power for 22 years, so he doesn't think that anybody has any advice to give him anymore.
And we know what he's capable of, with thousands of Russian troops on Ukraine's border. Tonight, Russia's lawmakers approving the use of force. President Putin so far apparently undeterred by threats of sanctions and dismissing criticisms, including in our interview last year.
Do you worry that your opposition to NATO has actually strengthened it? For 6 years, NATO has spent more on defence.
That's some defence. Some defence.
He's gone to war 4 times. Chechnya, 1999, Georgia, 2008, Ukraine, 2014, Syria, 2015. In every single war, he's won. And that makes him more dangerous. I think he thinks he can win again.
Tonight, asked to respond to President Biden's televised announcement of sanctions, President Putin's spokesman said, "We didn't watch it." Lester?
Keir Simmons, thank you. Let's turn back home now. They were already convicted of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. But in Brunswick, Georgia today, a major ruling. A jury found that the 3 men who killed him did so because of the color of his skin, violating his civil rights. Ron Allen is there tonight.
Justice for Ahmaud Arbery!
Ahmaud Arbery's family and supporters after a federal jury found 3 men guilty of hate crimes, violating Arbery's rights by chasing him on a public street and killing him because he was black. Gregory McMichael, son Travis, and neighbor William Roddy Bryan, already convicted of murder in state court, today also found guilty of attempted kidnapping, and the McMichaels guilty of using a firearm to commit a violent crime.
I'm glad that the jurors came back with the correct verdict, and we finally got some justice for Ahmaud.
Guilty on every count after less than 4 hours of deliberations. Prosecutors telling the jury racial hatred motivated the 3 men, showing texts and social media posts laced with racial slurs, revealing Bryan was angry about his daughter's relationship with a black man. The older McMichael making disparaging remarks about black tenants renting property he owned. His son writing a message about liking his job because 0 N-words work with me.
Why do you think it's important to pursue these cases?
If you can't walk down the street
without fearing being targeted because of who you are, then what kind of country can we really hope to build?
In Washington, the Attorney General vowed to prosecute more cases like this one.
I cannot imagine the pain that a mother feels to have her son run down and then gunned down.
The verdict coming on the eve of the 2-year anniversary of the fatal encounter, also designated Ahmaud Arbery Day to honor him by Georgia's legislature. The 3 men convicted of killing Arbery already serving life in prison now each face the possibility of another life sentence, guilty of committing a hate crime. Lester?
All right, Ron Allen, thank you. And in Minneapolis, closing arguments in the civil rights trial of 3 former police officers who were on the scene when George Floyd died. Megan Fitzgerald has more.
The fate of 3 former Minneapolis police officers will soon be in the hands of a jury after both sides delivered closing arguments in the federal civil rights case. The prosecution making the case that these officers knew George Floyd needed medical help and didn't act, arguing that defendant Tu Tao stood for 6 minutes and stared at Officer Chauvin and George Floyd, and J. Alexander King was afraid to speak up to Chauvin despite checking Floyd's pulse twice and not finding one. Thomas Lane was holding down Floyd's legs, choosing not to stop the horror unfolding right under his nose. Legal experts say the prosecution has to prove willfulness, that the officers intended to break the law.
How difficult of a case is this for the prosecution?
This is a tough case for the prosecution because the government has to prove what was going on in the mind of these 3 defendants, that they knew that Officer Chauvin was acting illegally.
All 3 defense attorneys told jurors their clients didn't know Chauvin was committing a crime, and they deferred to Chauvin because he was the senior officer. Yesterday, Officer Lane testified that he did everything he could to help Floyd, even asking twice if they should roll him over. Lane said, "I remember Mr. Chauvin saying he is good like this when I said I was concerned." While Tao told jurors he was relying on the other 3 officers to care for Floyd's medical needs while he controlled the crowd. But it will be up to the jury to decide if the prosecution proved its case. Megan Fitzgerald, NBC News.
Coast to coast tonight, tens of millions are in the path of 2 winter storms. One of them already brought snow to eastern Oregon, causing a pileup involving almost 100 vehicles. 19 people were reported hurt. Al Roker is tracking these storms. Al, what are we in for?
Well, we've got 2 of them that we're watching, Lester. One here in the east already bringing heavy rain, some icy mixes up through the Great Lakes. Our second storm coming out of the Four Corners, that's going to be pushing through Friday across the country. We already have 46 million people under winter weather alerts stretching from California all the way to New England, as far south as central Texas. We've got 46 million people, I should say 37 million people, under wind advisories from the Gulf Coast, New England, on into the Southwest. And we're looking at flooding possible from Arkansas all the way up into New England. Rainfall amounts really concentrated right now in the Tennessee River Valley, 2 to 3 inches of rain. Icing, light to moderate, stretching from New England all the way down into Texas. And as far as snow is concerned, a foot in the Rockies. But look at what happens by Friday. We could be looking at 6 to 8 inches of snow around Boston and New York City, Lester, in play as well through Friday. So we're going to be watching this very closely.
As we like to say, you buried the lead.
Yeah.
All right, Al Roker, thank you very much. In just 60 seconds, could the Russian threat expand to this country? The cyber warning to government agencies and businesses, and the crash of 2 Black Hawk helicopters on a snow-covered mountain. A dismal day on Wall Street, with the Dow plunging more than 480 points as concerns over Ukraine rattle investors. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ both falling more than 1%. And amid the showdown with Russia, the Department of Homeland Security is sounding the alarm about potential Russian cyber attacks here in the U.S. Our Tom Costello on the escalating cyber battle.
The alert from DHS Cybersecurity, shields up. Every organization in the United States is at risk from cyber threats, citing the potential for the Russian government to consider escalating its destabilizing actions. The governor of New York today opening a new statewide Joint Cyber Operations Command Center.
The threat of cyber attacks is very real. Our state and our cities will be taking a leading role
in fortifying our defenses in the battlefield against cyber warfare.
Homeland Security urging every organization, business, and government agency to act now. Watch for signs of Russian activity in their networks, shore up cyber defenses, test backup systems, and ensure manual overrides are working for critical infrastructure. Cyber veterans fear an escalating cyber conflict.
It is possible that we get to the point where you have attacks against core infrastructure, attacks against infrastructure that is life critical, or even attempts to massively disrupt the economies of each country by our offensive forces.
It's happened before. Suspected Russian attacks have spread worldwide, taking down power grids, banks, businesses, even hospitals. U.S. government computers, food suppliers, and oil pipelines have been targeted. The challenge, a U.S. response risks escalating the cyber war.
Medium and small businesses are going to be targeted as well. And those kinds of infrastructures are not prepared to what the Russians, have in mind.
Security experts also warn Russia could launch and misinformation campaigns, including deepfake videos targeting Western countries. Lester?
Okay, Tom, thank you. Some scary moments in the mountains of Utah where 2 National Guard Black Hawk helicopters crashed just outside a ski area. It happened while the Blackhawks were on a training mission near the Snowbird Resort outside Salt Lake City. Officials said none of the crew members was seriously injured. I'm Lester Holt. Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.